Hey everyone, and welcome to Seriously Risky Business. My name is Amberleigh Jack, and this is the podcast here at Risky Biz all about cybersecurity policy and intelligence. And in just a moment, I will bring in Tom Uren, our policy and intelligence editor. But first up, I would like to thank the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for supporting Tom's work here at Risky Biz, and also Lawfare, who syndicate his newsletter and publish it on the Lawfare Media website. And finally, we do have a corporate sponsor this week, Trail of Bits, so big thanks to them for that. And Tom, g'day, thank you for joining me.
G'day, Amberleigh, how are you?
Pretty good, thanks, Tom. And just been reading through your newsletter here, and really keen to talk to you about the Salesloft Drift breach. And you've said there this is a great case study of the kind of sprawling impact that a breach on a single service provider can have. And I think you even said in the newsletter something like a single impact but massive blast radius. I guess to start with, Tom, what's the big deal here? Why is this a great case study, and what is the story here?
Yeah. So I think over the last little while, I've noticed that there's this trend of it's not hacking a device and then traditionally you would, pivot to other places within the network. You'd escalate to get higher privileges. You'd get to control the whole network. That's traditional hacking that cyber criminals or states would do. This is much more, let's get an authentication token and just use the authorities or privileges that token has to move through the network. So there's no compromise of boxes, there's no exploits, there's none of that. And that's been going on for a while, but this has turned into a great case study because there's so many affected third parties. Usually what happens is in this type of incident, there's a single company that's most directly affected. They very rarely go through the nuts and bolts of what actually went on. So the story here is that Salesloft Drift is an AI chat agent, and it's integrated often into Salesforce that many companies use. And this week we learnt that the way that the attacker in this broader breach, which I'll talk about a bit more, got in is, first of all, they compromised Salesloft's GitHub. So Salesloft said that they were somehow able to move from their GitHub account into their AWS environment, and they were able to get some sort of authentication token. And with that, they were able to compromise all of the Salesloft customers who'd integrated Salesloft Drift into their Salesforce.
Ooh,
so
the
sort of chain,
ideal.
the chain is GitHub, Salesloft GitHub, Salesloft AWS environment, and then to all of Salesloft Drift's customers who'd integrated it. And so that meant that they had access to a Google incident response person who's handling incident response for Salesloft, said potentially hundreds of companies. Now, what makes this interesting is that, as I said, usually when it's a single company, they're pretty tight-lipped about actually went on. In this case, one of the affected companies was Cloudflare, and they've produced quite a detailed blog post about the exact going-ons and what the threat actor in this case did. And so now we have the whole incident laid out from, not entirely laid out, but we've got a good overview of the whole incident from GitHub through to what they did at the compromised customers' Salesforce instances. So Cloudflare says that they spent quite a bit of time, several days, enumerating what was available, how Cloudflare managed their customer interactions, like the processes involved, how much data was there, what data was available. They even talk about exploring the API limits. So the limits where if the threat actor tried to gobble too much data, they would get pinged. So this is actually sounds like quite a carefully carried out operation. It wasn't just smash and grab and get everything. And the threat actor understood Cloudflare's Salesforce environment, and then it sucked up all the data it could as quickly as it could, understanding those rate limits so that it didn't get pinged immediately. And it turns out that it was able to get what are called customer case objects. So that includes, it's kind of analogous to an email. So it included the subject line, the text that customers and Cloudflare had shared back and forth, so the sort of communications, but it didn't include files or attachments. Now, in those communications, Cloudflare said that it found 104 API keys. So in the course of normal discussion with their customers, people had shared, you'd call them secrets or authentication tokens that could allow the threat actor to do something else. It would, possession of those would give the threat actor some ability to do something somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we've gone from the compromise of Salesloft's GitHub to potentially the compromise of all sorts of different things. So depending upon the company that's affected, it could have who knows what. Depending upon what they talk to with their customers and what customers and they paste into that chat. So it could be, passwords, AWS keys, who knows. So it's become a potentially very, very broad, quite unscoped. Like, it's hard to know how that would flow, because there would be some customers where they never talk about that sort of stuff. And so they're, no keys, no passwords, that's okay. And other companies where maybe Salesforce is used to handle that material all the time. And so I thought this was just a classic example that because Cloudflare and Salesloft have been more or less, they've revealed enough detail that we've got this good picture that it felt like a case study that was worth writing about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sort of say in the newsletter as well, Tom, that this is kind of becoming increasingly common. We can expect to see more attacks, more sort of fallout and attacks like this. Why is that?
I think it's just because of the way that once you've got an authentication token, there's not a lot of tools that make it easy to know that it's being used incorrectly or correctly. So you have to have some other sort of control layered on top. And so it's, like I said, with traditional hacking, there's a lot of security tools that are optimized for traditional hacking. There's not a lot of security tools that are optimized to figure out, is this legitimate authentication token being used correctly or maliciously? So there are options. It's just that they're not as well deployed, and so it sidesteps a lot of the traditional protections. And it's a new, it's a greenfields opportunity for threat actors to some degree.
Is there a plan of action here? Do we just kind of sit around and wait for things to go boom and watch the massive fallout? Like what?
From the perspective of a policy newsletter, that would be great. I think there are lots of things that you can do. It's just that they're not necessarily the done things, and they're all more work.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. So there's some good blog posts already. So Cloudflare's write-up of the incident has suggested remediation steps. Salesloft has suggested remediation steps. There's a good blog post from Joshua Wright, I think his name is, about authorisation sprawl, which also has a list of suggestions or recommendations. The thing is, they're just not what people normally do. And the nature of these things is that people get bitten and then they adjust their behaviour.
Yeah.
But I think that's the reason that this is a good study to talk about from a defensive point of view is it's also a good case study to talk about from a cyber criminal's point of view, in that it's like, oh, hang on, we're already doing 75% of this this other threat actor has done this other thing that gave them all sorts of new opportunities. So I think threat actors will also be learning off this case study, which is, I guess it's inevitable.
Fun times
Not
ahead then.
ideal.
I want to jump into your second story here, which is Apple. New security feature that they have just announced, and apparently it's a really big deal, Tom.
So they've launched this thing they call memory integrity enforcement. So a while back I wrote about memory safety issues. So it turns out that one of the most common ways that you can compromise a device is by basically fiddling with the way it stores memory or manipulating the way it stores memory to your advantage. And there's actually a very long history of these types of attacks going back like 50 years. And yet they're still surprisingly common. And the reason I wrote about it about a year ago was that the US government and allies had basically launched a kind of memory safety initiative where they were trying to encourage people to use memory safe languages that don't have these same kind of flaws. And so this week, Apple, with the rollout of their next generation chips, announced what they call memory integrity enforcement. And the idea is that they've got this hardware and software approach that makes it a lot harder for threat actors to compromise their devices by making it a lot harder to manipulate memory in undesirable ways. And this was interesting to me because, well, first of all, it's part of a trend where people are moving to memory safe implementations, languages. And it's also because Apple actually has, in my view, it's actually got not much incentive to try and invest in this kind of cutting edge work.
Yeah.
So the story is that Apple devices are very rarely compromised by sophisticated malware. And the cases where that has happened, it's been either states or I guess the most famous example is NSO Group, where they had their Pegasus malware. And that relies on some of these memory manipulation tricks. And they're trying to make it very, very hard for particularly mercenary spyware to get onto devices. And the reason I think it's interesting is that just affects very few people. In terms of Apple's customer base, it's a vanishingly small percentage of people who get affected by that. So they're doing all this work really to reduce the risk for a small number of people. And there's no real business case for that. They could just gradually improve things without a huge amount of effort, and they'd still be in a good place. I think it makes no difference to their bottom dollar.
Yeah. This isn't something that, school teacher Joe down the road will have to rush out and buy the iPhone 17 because it has this feature. So why, if it is such a small sort of set of their customer base, why do you think they're doing this?
I think they've got it in their sort of corporate culture. I think there's they just believe in doing it. I think they've got the money to do it. Apple is not currently cash strapped, so they've got...
Always helps.
That's right. And I don't think it cuts against some of their other business interests. Sometimes doing security work slows you down in other areas and makes it more... your product's less competitive. If they're slower to market because they're more secure, is that, on balance, a good thing for the business? Actually, maybe not. And I don't think there's this dynamic in this case. It's they have a work stream that is improving memory safety, security, and that isn't a detriment to their other business. So a lot of this work was to make sure that it could implement memory safety without slowing down the devices.
Right.
And so I think that's a trade-off that they wouldn't make. But in this case, they're able to do a lot of clever engineering. They sort of balance what's done in hardware and what's done in software so that, you're doing the right thing in the right place, and you're getting the best protection for the least performance cost.
Yeah, for sure. And it was a lot of work, wasn't it? It was like half a decade of kind of attacking and re-attacking and testing. And
yeah, they call it the culmination of at least 5 years of work.
Wow.
And how do you measure how much work's gone into a chip these days? Like it goes back 50 years. But from an offensive point of view, they have a research team that was constantly attacking, I guess, what they thought they were building. And so they would have a theoretical target. They'd try and attack it. And then that eventually they built a virtual environment or a simulated environment, and they'd try and attack that. And what they learnt from the attacks kind of iteratively fed into the protections that they used. And then finally, they're towards the end, they're attacking prototype hardware. And so at each stage, they learnt something. Like Apple said that this allowed us to identify and eradicate entire attack strategies and techniques before attackers could ever discover them. So that process of introducing mitigations that eliminate classes of attacks has been very successful. So over the time, people have used address space, layout randomization, and PAC, pointer authentication, something beginning with C. those techniques, because they eliminate classes of attacks, are very effective at just making it very much harder for exploit writers. And so I expect that this will make a significant difference. It's not going to make iPhones like impregnable. Like there will still be attacks. It'll just be a lot harder. And I suppose if you limit it to states, maybe, well, that's a win. That's a win. And I think even though Apple is in somewhat of a unique position because of its business model, the ability to devote resources, its hardware and software integration, other companies will learn from this. And so there'll no doubt be, in a year or so, these sort of techniques and strategies that Apple has used will be working their way into other products as well.
Okay, Tom, look, we will leave you there, but thank you so much for joining me, and we'll catch you again same time next week.
Thanks, Amberleigh.